I'm Lillian, 32 years old, lying in a sterile hospital room with tubes running from my body. The beeping monitors are the only sound breaking the silence after my mother spoke those 5 devastating words. "You're dead to me." She said it so calmly, standing over my broken body after the accident that nearly claimed my life. In that moment, I knew I would make a choice that would shock her completely. Let me tell you what happened. Before I share my story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location, in the comments hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. Growing up in Maplewood, a small town in Pennsylvania, I always felt like I was living in 2 different worlds. There was the picture-perfect family we presented to everyone else, and then there was the reality behind closed doors. My mother Diane was always particular but manageable when my father Thomas was alive. He was the buffer, the mediator, the one who could make her laugh even during her worst moods. Lily Pad, my dad would say, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. Your mum just wants what's best for you. She just shows it differently than most. I believed him back then. I thought all mothers critiqued every detail of their daughters' lives, from their grades to their hair to their choice in friends. I thought all mothers had certain rooms in the house that were only for show, never to be actually used or enjoyed. When I was 15, everything changed. Dad had a sudden heart attack at work. The bakery he had built from nothing sweet memories became the place where his life ended. I was at school when the principal called me to her office. The moment I saw my mother sitting there, her face oddly blank, I knew something terrible had happened. "Your father is gone," she said, no tears, no emotion. Just 4 words that shattered my world. The funeral was a blur of faces and casseroles, and my mother standing ramrod straight beside me, accepting condolences with nods and tight smiles. I cried enough for both of us, but later that night I heard her through the wall sobbing in a way that didn't even sound human. After that, it was like living with a different person. The occasionally strict mother became tyrannical. The sometimes critical comments became constant emotional warfare. My younger sister Amanda, who was only 9 at the time, quickly learned to adapt. She became the perfect daughter, anticipating our mother's wishes before she even expressed them. I tried, but I could never quite get it right. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became a common refrain throughout my teenage years. Amanda got straight A's. Amanda kept her room spotless. Amanda never talked back. "Why do you always have to be difficult, Lillian?" my mother would ask, pronouncing my full name with such disappointment. Despite the constant criticism, I managed to graduate high school with honors and get accepted to nursing school. I thought my mother would be proud that I wanted to help people to save lives. "Nursing," she had said when I told her. "All that education to be someone's assistant, why not become a doctor?" "Nurses aren't assistants, Mom. They're the backbone of healthcare," I tried to explain. "Well, I suppose it's better than working at the bakery forever," she had conceded, which was as close to approval as I was going to get. The bakery Sweet Memories had expanded under my mother's leadership after Dad died. What started as 1 location grew into 3 small shops across neighboring towns. My father had built the business with love-quality ingredients and personal connections with customers. My mother expanded it with ruthless efficiency, cutting costs wherever possible, while maintaining just enough quality to keep customers coming back. Throughout nursing school, I worked at the original bakery location on weekends. It was my way of staying connected to Dad. Sometimes I would arrive early before anyone else and just stand in the kitchen, closing my eyes and imagining him there, flour dusting his dark hair with premature white, his booming laugh filling the space. My mother noticed. "Stop wasting time daydreaming and check on the display cases," she'd say, catching me in these moments. It was during my final year of nursing school that I met James. He came into the emergency department where I was doing my clinical rotation, his arm sliced open from a construction accident. I was assigned to assist with his stitches, and despite the blood and his obvious pain, he kept making jokes. "Is this how you always pick up women?" I asked as I cleaned his wound, getting grievously injured just to talk to them. "Only the special ones." He winked, then grimaced as the local anesthetic was administered. He asked for my number before leaving. I hesitated, which he noticed. "Just for coffee," he said. "No pressure. And if you say no, I promise not to injure myself again, just to see you." I gave him my number. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekend hikes. Before I knew it, we were inseparable. My mother hated him on sight. "A construction worker," she said after meeting him for the first time. "That's who you think is good enough for you." "He's not just a construction worker, Mom. He's a project manager for a major company. He has a degree in engineering. He works with his hands, she said dismissively, just like your father, and look where that got us. That was the first time I truly got angry with her. Dad's work with his hands built the business you're so proud of now, I snapped, and James is kind, intelligent, and treats me with respect, which is more than I can say for how you treat me. I stormed out after that. Amanda called me later, begging me to apologize. You know how she gets when people bring up Dad, she said. Just say you're sorry and things can go back to normal. But I was tired of normal. Normal meant walking on eggshells. Normal meant constant criticism. Normal meant never being good enough. Still, family was family. I swallowed my pride and apologized, not for what I said, but for how I said it. My mother accepted with a curt nod, and the subject of James was tacitly agreed to be off limits during family gatherings. Through all of this, there was one person who understood what I was going through. Aunt Catherine, my mother's older sister, had been estranged from our family for years. I maintained secret contact with her against my mother's wishes. Your mother and I were close once, Catherine told me over coffee during one of our clandestine meetings. Before she met your father, actually. We were best friends as well as sisters. But she changed after your grandparents died. Became more controlling, more fearful of loss. Then when she met Thomas, it got better for a while. He brought out the best in her. What happened between you two? I asked, having never heard the full story. Catherine sighed. I disagreed with how she was handling your grandfather's estate. She wanted to sell everything property that had been in our family for generations. I fought her on it and things got ugly. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. Sounds familiar, I said ruefully. The difference is I stood my ground, and that's why we haven't spoken in 15 years. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm not saying that's the right approach for you. Just be careful not to lose yourself trying to please someone who might never be satisfied. Those words would come back to me in the hospital, but I'm getting ahead of myself. After graduating nursing school, I got a position in the emergency department at Maplewood General Hospital. The work was challenging, but fulfilling exactly what I had hoped for. James and I moved in together, much to my mother's silent disapproval. 2 years into my career, on my 30th birthday, James proposed. It wasn't a grand gesture in a fancy restaurant, but a quiet moment on our balcony after a long shift. He knew I was exhausted, but didn't want the day to pass without marking it. I know you probably want to just crash, he said, as we sat outside with glasses of wine, but I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. He pulled out a small box. Then I realized there is no perfect moment. There's just us deciding to face whatever comes together. So Lillian Carter, will you marry me? The ring was simple but beautiful, a family heirloom from his grandmother. I said yes immediately, then cried from happiness and exhaustion. The next day we went to tell my mother and Amanda. Amanda squealed and hugged me tight. My mother examined the ring with a critical eye. It's rather small, isn't it? She said. And old-fashioned. It was his grandmother's, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. It's perfect. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order, she said, not sounding congratulatory at all. Have you set a date? Not yet, we just got engaged yesterday. You'll want to book venues early. The good ones fill up a year in advance. Of course, we could use the function room above the Main Street bakery location. That would save money. Actually, James spoke up. We were thinking of something outdoors. Maybe at Riverdale Park. My mother's lips tightened. A park for a wedding that hardly seems appropriate for my daughter. Mum, we haven't decided anything yet, I interjected, seeing James's jaw tense. We'll figure it out and let you know. The drive home was silent until James finally spoke. She's going to make this whole process miserable, isn't she? I couldn't honestly disagree. In the months that followed, every wedding decision became a battleground. My mother insisted on being involved in every detail, despite our attempts to plan independently. She criticized our choice of date, venue, caterer, and even my dress, which I hadn't even chosen yet. You don't have the figure for a mermaid style, she commented during one particularly tense shopping trip. You should consider something more forgiving. I had lost 10 pounds from stress alone since the engagement. The final straw came 3 months before the accident. We were having a family dinner at my mother's house, finalizing the guest list. My mother had added 15 names of business associates I barely knew. Mum, we're trying to keep it intimate, I explained. Just close friends and family. These people are important to the business, she insisted. Some of them have known you since you were a child. Known of me, maybe, I corrected. I couldn't pick most of them out of a lineup. This isn't just about you, Lillian, she snapped. This wedding reflects on the entire family. Actually, James said quietly, it is about Lillian and me. It's our wedding. My mother turned her cold gaze on him. Perhaps if you were contributing more financially to this event, you'd have more say in it. The silence that followed was deafening. James and I had declined her financial assistance specifically to avoid this exact scenario, but she had insisted on paying for certain elements anyway. Diane, James said, using her first name, which he knew she hated. We appreciate your input, but ultimately, these decisions are ours to make. I see, she said, her voice eerily calm. So that's how it's going to be. My daughter allows her fiancé to disrespect me in my own home. And James isn't disrespecting you. I defended him. He's setting a boundary, which is something I should have done years ago. Is that what he tells you to think? She asked. Has he turned you against your family already? The only person turning me against my family is you, I said, standing up. And I'm done with this conversation. Come on, James. As we gathered our things to leave, my mother delivered her parting shot. If you walk out now, Lillian, you can plan your wedding entirely on your own. Don't expect another cent from me. I turned at the door. That was always the plan, Mum. Your money comes with too many strings attached. Amanda followed us out to the car. Lil, please don't leave like this. You know she doesn't mean it. She's just stressed about the business. The Lincoln Heights location is struggling and she's worried about having to close it. That's not my problem, Amanda, I said, though I felt a pang of guilt. I can't keep putting my life on hold to manage her emotions. She's still our mother, Amanda pleaded. Then she should start acting like it, I replied, getting into the car. That was the last conversation I had with my family before the accident. For 3 weeks there was silence. No calls, no texts. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts to avoid thinking about the rift. James worried about me, but respected my need to process things in my own way. Then came the night that changed everything. It was raining heavily that night. I had just finished a 12-hour shift in the emergency department and I was exhausted. 3 traumas had come in during the last hour and I had stayed late to help stabilize them. My mind was still in work mode. As I drove home reviewing medications and procedures, wondering if we could have done anything differently. The rain pounded against my windshield, and even with the wipers on the highest setting, visibility was poor. I should have been more cautious, should have slowed down more on the curves, but I was running on autopilot, eager to get home to a hot shower and my bed. I remember the headlights coming around the bend seeming to float in the darkness. I remember thinking they looked too close to the center line. I remember jerking the steering wheel to avoid them. I don't remember the car spinning. I don't remember the impact with the guardrail. I don't remember my car flipping down the embankment. The next thing I do remember is pain. Blinding, all-encompassing pain that seemed to radiate from every part of my body. I remember the taste of blood in my mouth and the sound of rain hitting metal. I remember trying to move and finding I couldn't. I remember thinking about James, about how he would worry when I didn't come home. Then darkness again. They told me later that another driver saw my taillights in the ravine and called 911. They told me the fire department had to use the jaws of life to extract me from the wreckage. They told me I was technically dead for almost 2 minutes before they resuscitated me in the ambulance. James heard about the accident when the hospital called him as my emergency contact. He later told me he had never driven so fast or so recklessly in his life. He arrived at the emergency department of the very hospital where I worked only to find my colleagues working frantically to save my life. "Let me see her," he demanded, trying to push his way into the trauma room. Dr. Patel, the trauma surgeon on call, and my mentor physically blocked him. "James, we're doing everything we can, but you need to let us work. Go call her family." He did, though he hated making that call almost as much as he hated not being able to see me. My mother and Amanda arrived 45 minutes later. According to James, my mother was oddly composed while Amanda couldn't stop crying. They sat together in the surgical waiting room while I underwent emergency surgery to repair my punctured lung and internal bleeding. I had broken 6 ribs, punctured my left lung, fractured my pelvis, shattered my right wrist, and sustained a significant head trauma. The surgery lasted 5 hours. When Dr. Patel finally came out to speak to my family, he was cautiously optimistic. "We've stabilized her injuries, but the next 24 hours will be critical," he explained. "The head injury is our biggest concern. She's currently in a medically induced coma to give her brain time to heal." "But she'll recover?" James asked. "It's too soon to say for certain," Dr. Patel answered honestly. "She's young and healthy, which works in her favor. But these injuries are severe." For 3 days I lay unconscious in the ICU. James refused to leave sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside my bed. My mother and sister visited during the day, but went home each night. According to the nurses, James talked to me constantly, telling me about his day, reading me articles from my favourite medical journals, and promising me everything would be okay. On the fourth day, I opened my eyes. Everything was blurry at first, and the bright lights of the ICU sent spikes of pain through my head. I tried to speak, but there was a tube down my throat. Panic set in until I felt a warm hand on mine. Lil, it's me. You're okay. You're in the hospital. You've been in an accident, but you're going to be fine. Don't try to talk. Just squeeze my hand if you can hear me. James. I squeezed his hand weakly. The next few hours were a blur of doctors' tests and the uncomfortable process of having my breathing tube removed. By that evening, I was able to speak in short, painful sentences, and the neurologist seemed pleased with my cognitive responses. You're one lucky woman, Lillian, Dr. Singh, the neurologist told me. With the severity of the impact, we were concerned about permanent brain damage, but you seem to be beating the odds. Lucky wasn't how I felt, racked with pain and connected to what seemed like a dozen machines, but I nodded anyway. It was the next morning when everything fell apart. James had gone to the cafeteria to get coffee when my mother and Amanda arrived for their daily visit. I was still groggy from the pain medication, but alert enough to register their presence. Lillian, my mother said, standing at the foot of my bed, her posture rigid as always. You look terrible. Thanks, Mom. I croaked, my throat still raw from the intubation. Amanda moved to the side of the bed and took my hand gently. We were so worried, Lil. The doctors said you almost didn't make it. Still here. I managed a small smile for my sister. My mother surveyed the room, noting the flowers and cards that had accumulated from my co-workers. I see your colleagues have been by. And James said the entire emergency department has been checking in, Amanda told me. They really care about you. Of course they do, my mother said dismissively. She works with them. I closed my eyes briefly, too tired for this. Mom, if you came just to criticize, maybe come back later. I'm not criticizing, she said, sounding offended. I'm making an observation, and what I observe is that this accident could have been avoided if you had been more careful, even through the haze of medication that stung. The other car crossed the center line, I said. It wasn't my fault. You were working late again, weren't you? Driving home exhausted in a rainstorm? That's hardly responsible behavior. Diane, Amanda said softly, the doctor said we shouldn't upset her. My mother ignored her. This is what happens when you push yourself too hard, trying to prove something. First the excessive work hours, then rushing into this engagement with James, now this. It's a pattern of poor choices. Mum, please, I whispered, tears forming in my eyes. Not now. If not now, when you nearly died, Lillian. Does it take almost losing your life to make you see reason? To make you understand that your choices affect everyone around you? Do you have any idea what this has done to our family? To the business? The business, I repeated, incredulous, despite my weakened state. I'm lying here broken, and you're worried about the business. Someone has to be, she snapped. While you've been playing house with James and throwing tantrums about wedding plans, the Lincoln Heights location is on the verge of closing. Your sister and I have been working overtime trying to save it, but of course you're too busy with your own life to care about the legacy your father left us. That's not fair, I said, trying to sit up and gasping at the pain that tore through my chest. Life isn't fair, Lillian. Your father wasn't supposed to die and leave me alone to raise 2 children and run a business. I wasn't supposed to have a daughter who constantly defies me and makes my life more difficult. And I certainly wasn't supposed to spend 3 days wondering if you were going to wake up at all, only to have you continue the same selfish behavior that got you here in the first place. Selfish, I repeated, my voice breaking. How am I selfish? Everything is always about you, your career, your relationship, your wedding. Never mind what's best for the family. Never mind what your father would have wanted. You don't know what Dad would have wanted, I said, anger giving strength to my voice. He would have wanted me to be happy. He would have supported my choices. Your father isn't here, she said coldly, and neither apparently is my daughter. The Lillian I raised would never speak to me this way, would never abandon her family responsibilities, would never choose a man over her own mother. I didn't choose James over you, I protested. I chose to be treated with respect. Respect is earned, she said, and all I see is a selfish girl who's thrown away everything her family built for her. I was crying openly now, the tears making my head throb even more. Why are you doing this? Why can't you just be glad I'm alive? And that's when she said it, the words that changed everything. As far as I'm concerned, you're dead to me. The room went silent except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor, which accelerated as her words registered. Amanda gasped. I stared at my mother, unable to process what she had just said. "Diane?" Amanda exclaimed, shocked. My mother's face remained impassive. "I've said what needed to be said. Come, Amanda, we're leaving." "But Mom, we just got here," Amanda protested. "Now, Amanda." Amanda looked at me, torn between loyalty to our mother and concern for me. "I'll come back later," she whispered, squeezing my hand before following our mother out. They nearly collided with James in the doorway. He took one look at my tear-streaked face and the retreating figures of my mother and sister, and his expression darkened. "What happened? What did she say to you?" I couldn't speak through the sobs that were now racking my body, sending fresh waves of pain through my injured ribs. What I didn't know then was that Nurse Taylor, who had been my preceptor when I first started at the hospital, had been standing just outside the door coming to check my vitals. She had heard everything. As my monitors began alarming from my distress, she rushed in, gently pushing James aside. "Lillian, I need you to try to calm down," she said professionally, though her eyes were kind. "Deep breaths, honey. That's it." She administered additional pain medication, then waited until I had calmed somewhat before speaking again. "I've known your mother for years," she said quietly. "We were in the same high school class. She was difficult even then." She adjusted my pillow carefully. "Some people just can't help themselves. They're so consumed by their own pain that they spread it to everyone around them." Her words, so similar to what Aunt Catherine had told me, hit home. As the medication began to take effect, dulling both the physical and emotional pain, I made a decision. If I was dead to my mother, then I would start a new life, one where her opinion no longer dictated my choices. I just had no idea then how far-reaching the consequences of that decision would be. The next few weeks were a blur of pain medications and small incremental improvements. I was moved from the ICU to a regular room, then eventually discharged with a long list of follow-up appointments and physical therapy sessions. Through it all, James was my constant, unwavering support. He took a leave of absence from work to care for me, helping me with everything from bathing to medication management. He drove me to appointments, learnt my physical therapy exercises to help me practice at home, and never once complained about the burden. "This isn't a burden," he insisted when I apologized for the millionth time. "This is what partners do. In sickness and in health, remember, we're just getting a head start on those vows." His humor, more than anything, kept me going through the darkest days. Because despite the physical pain of recovery, it was the emotional wound inflicted by my mother that hurt the most. She didn't call, she didn't visit. It was as if she had meant exactly what she said that day in the hospital. I was dead to her. Amanda called occasionally, always, when our mother was out of the house. She sounded stressed and unhappy. "The business is struggling even more now," she told me during one call. "Mum refuses to change anything about how we operate, but the Lincoln Heights location is hemorrhaging money. I've tried suggesting updates to the menu marketing on social media, anything to bring in new customers, but she shoots down every idea." "I'm sorry you're dealing with that alone," I said sincerely. "I'm more worried about you," she said. "How's recovery going?" I gave her an edited version downplaying the setbacks and focusing on the progress. No need to add to her stress. "And the wedding?" she asked hesitantly. "Are you guys still planning for next spring?" James and I had discussed postponing given my recovery timeline, but I was determined not to let my mother's actions derail any more of my life. "We're still on track," I told her. "It'll be smaller than we originally planned, but that's fine. Just close friends and family." I paused. "You'll be there, right, even if Mom forbids it?" Her silence spoke volumes. "Amanda, I want to be there," she said finally. "You know I do, but things are complicated right now." "They're only complicated if you let her make them that way," I said more sharply than I intended. "That's easy for you to say," she snapped back, surprising me. Amanda rarely lost her temper. "You've always been the strong one, the one who stands up to her. I'm the one who has to live with her every day, who has to pick up the pieces when you two fight." "Do you have any idea what it was like after you left that night? Or after the hospital?" She was inconsolable, but she wouldn't admit it. Just threw herself into work until she was making herself sick. I didn't ask her to say what she said. I defended myself. I didn't ask her to disown me. "No, but you pushed her to that point. You know how she is, how fragile she is underneath all that control. You know she never recovered from losing Dad." "None of us did," I said quietly. "But we don't all use our grief as a weapon against the people who love us." There was a long silence before Amanda spoke again. "I should go. She'll be home soon." "Amanda?" I said before she could hang up. I love you. No matter what happens between Mom and me, that won't change. I love you too, she said, her voice thick with tears. I just don't know how to fix this. Maybe some things can't be fixed, I said. Maybe they can only be rebuilt into something different. After that conversation, I sank into a deep depression. The physical pain I could handle, but the feeling of being cut off from half of my family, of being a burden to James, of having my carefully planned life derailed completely, was overwhelming. James noticed, of course. He suggested therapy, which I initially resisted. I was a healthcare professional after all. I should be able to manage my own mental health. But when I found myself crying in the shower every morning, hiding the sounds from James, I knew I needed help. Dr. Winters, the therapist James found for me, specialized in trauma and family dynamics. She listened to my story without judgment, then asked the question that would change everything. What do you want, Lillian? What do you mean? I asked, confused. I mean exactly that, setting aside what your mother wants, what your sister wants, even what James wants. What do you want for your life going forward? I realized I didn't have an answer. I had spent so much of my life trying to please my mother while simultaneously rebelling against her control that I had never fully considered what I wanted independent of her influence. I don't know, I admitted. Then that's where we start, she said simply. Over the next several weeks, as my body slowly healed, I worked with Dr. Winters to rediscover myself. I made lists of things I enjoyed, values I held dear, goals that excited me. I examined which parts of my life brought me joy and which were obligatory. I explored the complicated grief I still carried for my father and the new grief I felt for the relationship with my mother. During this time, I also received an unexpected visitor. I was home alone, James having returned to work part-time when the doorbell rang. I maneuvered carefully to the door with my walking cane, still unsteady from the pelvic fracture, and opened it to find Aunt Catherine standing there with a casserole dish in her hands. Amanda called me, she said by way of greeting, said you could use some company, and my famous lasagna. I broke down crying right there in the doorway, and Catherine set the dish aside to embrace me gently, mindful of my injuries. Over lunch, I told her everything. The fight before the accident, my mother's words at the hospital, the silence since then. She listened without interrupting, her face growing more troubled as I continued. Your mother and I are more alike than either of us would care to admit, she said finally. We both inherited our father's stubborn pride. The difference is I learnt to recognize when it was hurting more than helping. She reached across the table to take my hand. Diane never did. After your father died, it got worse. She built walls to protect herself from more pain, not realizing she was walling herself off from love too. That doesn't excuse what she said to me, I said, the hurt still fresh. No, it doesn't, Catherine agreed. Nothing excuses that, but understanding it might help you decide how to move forward. I don't even know if there is a way forward, I admitted. She made it pretty clear where I stand. People say terrible things in moments of fear and pain, Catherine said. Things they can't take back but may not fully mean. You think she didn't mean it? I think your mother is terrified of losing people she loves, and her response to that fear is to push them away first, to regain control of the situation. Catherine sighed. I've had 17 years to think about our falling out. 17 years to wonder if either of us could have done things differently. Do you regret standing your ground? I asked. No, she said without hesitation. I regret that it cost me my relationship with my sister. I regret that I didn't get to see you and Amanda grow up. But I don't regret being true to myself and my values. She squeezed my hand. The question you need to answer is what you can live with. Can you go back to walking on eggshells around her? Can you forgive what she said without a genuine apology? Or do you need to create some distance to protect yourself? I considered her words carefully. I think I need to focus on my healing right now, both physical and emotional. I can't fix my relationship with my mother when I'm still trying to fix myself. That, Catherine said with approval, sounds like a very wise decision. That conversation became a turning point in my recovery. With Catherine's support added to James's and the tools Dr. Winters was helping me develop, I began to create a vision for my life that wasn't defined by my mother's approval or disapproval. I started setting clear boundaries. I limited my conversations with Amanda to once a week to avoid being dragged back into family drama. I made a schedule for my recovery that included not just physical therapy, but activities that brought me joy, like reading novels and gentle gardening on our small balcony. I also made a list of priorities for when I was strong enough to return to work. I had always loved emergency nursing, but the accident had given me a new appreciation for trauma care and recovery. Perhaps there was a way to combine those interests. James supported every decision, offering input when asked, but never pushing his own agenda. We decided to postpone the wedding until I was fully recovered, but set a new date for the following fall, giving me a full year to heal. "We'll get married on our own terms," he said, "no matter who is or isn't there to witness it." I was finally starting to believe that my life could be good, even beautiful, without my mother's approval. I was 2 months into recovery, just beginning to wean off the stronger pain medications and increase my physical activity when Amanda called in a panic. "Lil, I need your help," she said without preamble. "The business is in serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked, immediately concerned despite my determination to maintain boundaries. "Mom had to close the Lincoln Heights location last week," Amanda explained, her voice tense. "The landlord wouldn't renew the lease because we were constantly late with rent. And now the bank is threatening to call in the loans on the other 2 locations if we can't show improved cash flow." I sank down onto the couch, wincing as my still healing ribs protested the movement. I thought things were tough, but I didn't realize they were that bad. "Mom didn't want anyone to know," Amanda said. "She kept saying she could handle it, but I found the past due notices yesterday when she was out. Lil, we're 3 months behind on the business loan payments." "Have you talked to her about it?" "I tried. She just says we need to cut more costs, but we've already switched to cheaper suppliers and the quality is suffering. Customers are noticing, reviews are getting worse. It's a downward spiral." I rubbed my temple, feeling a headache forming. "Why are you telling me this?" "Amanda, what do you expect me to do?" Mom made it very clear where I stand with her and the family business. There was a pause before Amanda spoke again, her voice smaller. "I know what she said was horrible, unforgivable even, but this isn't just about her, Lil. This is Dad's legacy too, and it's my livelihood. I don't have a nursing degree to fall back on. This bakery is all I have." The guilt hit me hard. It wasn't Amanda's fault that our mother had disowned me, yet she was suffering the consequences. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I said finally. "Meet with me. Just me, not Mum. Let me show you the books, the situation we're in. Maybe you'll see something we've missed. You were always better with numbers than either of us." I hesitated. Getting involved with the business meant getting pulled back into my mother's orbit, which was exactly what I had been trying to avoid. "Please, Lil," Amanda begged. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't desperate. I thought about what Catherine had said about regrets, about my father and the business he had built with love, about Amanda who had always been caught in the crossfire between our mother and me. "Okay," I said finally, "but just you and me. I'm not ready to see Mom yet." "Thank you." Amanda's relief was palpable. "Can we meet tomorrow at that coffee shop near your apartment?" We arranged the details, and after hanging up, I sat staring at the phone for a long time. James found me like that when he came home from work. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern immediately evident on his face. I told him about Amanda's call and my agreement to look at the bakery's finances. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" he asked carefully. "Getting involved with the business again?" "Probably not," I admitted. "But it's Dad's legacy, and Amanda needs help." "I get that," he said, sitting beside me. "I just worry about you getting hurt again. Your mother said some pretty vicious things." "I know, and I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing it for Dad, and for Amanda." I leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Besides, I'm just going to look at the books. Give some advice, maybe. It doesn't mean I'm going back to work there or having Sunday dinner with Mum again." James wasn't entirely convinced, I could tell, but he supported my decision as always. The next day, he offered to come with me to meet Amanda, but I declined. This was something I needed to do myself. The coffee shop was quiet when I arrived earlier than our arranged time. I was still moving slowly, relying on my cane for stability. Amanda rushed in 10 minutes late, looking frazzled and exhausted, a thick folder clutched in her hands. "Sorry," she said, dropping into the seat across from me. Morning rush was crazy, and Mom insisted on reworking the entire display case before I could leave. Looking at her more closely, I noticed the dark circles under her eyes and how much weight she had lost since I last saw her. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then caught herself. "Actually, no, I'm not. I'm exhausted, I'm scared, and I miss you." "Good." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I miss you too." She blinked back tears, then straightened her shoulders. Okay, let's look at these numbers before I completely fall apart in public. She opened the folder and spread out monthly financial statements, loan documents, and sales reports. The picture they painted was even worse than I had imagined. Not only was the business behind on loan payments, but sales had been steadily declining for the past year. Costs had increased while revenue dropped. When did it start getting this bad? I asked, examining a particularly concerning monthly statement. It's been gradual, Amanda explained, but it accelerated after Dad's old head baker quit last year. Mum replaced him with someone cheaper but less experienced. Quality suffered. I nodded, making notes. And these supplier changes? Started about 6 months ago. Mum's been cutting corners everywhere she can. Cheaper flour, lower quality chocolate, artificial flavourings instead of real vanilla. Customers notice, especially the regulars who have been coming since Dad's time. I continued through the paperwork, asking questions and taking notes. When I reached the business loan document, something caught my eye. Amanda, have you ever actually read this loan agreement? She shook her head. Mum handled all of that. Why? I read the concerning section aloud. In the event of default, the lender reserves the right to call due the entire remaining balance or to exercise the option to assume partial ownership stake as detailed in Addendum B. What does that mean? Amanda asked, looking confused. I flipped to the referenced addendum and scanned it quickly, my heart sinking. It means that instead of foreclosing on the business, the bank can take an ownership stake. Dad signed this as a personal guarantee on the original loan for expansion. Is that bad? It depends, I said, reading further. In some ways, it's better than outright foreclosure. But it means we'd lose control of major business decisions, and based on this wording, they could force a sale to recoup their investment. Amanda looked stricken. So we could lose the business either way. Not necessarily. I said, my mind already working on possible solutions. But we need a plan, a real one, not just cutting costs until there's nothing left worth buying. We spent the next 2 hours going through every aspect of the business, finances, and operations. By the time we finished our now cold coffees, I had a preliminary idea of what needed to be done. The business needs an injection of capital, I explained to Amanda. But more importantly, it needs updated operations, better marketing, and a return to the quality Dad insisted on. The Sweet Memories name still has value in this community, but that goodwill won't last if the product continues to decline. Where would we get the money? Amanda asked. The bank won't lend us more. I took a deep breath, knowing my next words would change everything. I have savings, and James and I had set aside money for the wedding that we won't be using right away since we postponed. Amanda's eyes widened. Lil, no, I can't ask you to do that. You didn't ask, I'm offering, but I held up a hand as she started to thank me. It would come with conditions. What kind of conditions? She asked cautiously. I'd want partial ownership, equal decision-making power with Mom, and a clear business plan that everyone agrees to follow. I looked her directly in the eyes. That's non-negotiable. I'm not putting my money into a business where I have no say in how it's run. Amanda bit her lip. Mum will never agree to that. You know how she is about control. Then the business will fail, I said bluntly. I'm sorry to be harsh, but that's the reality. The current trajectory is unsustainable. Something has to change. Let me talk to her, Amanda said after a moment. Maybe if she sees the numbers the way you've laid them out, she'll understand the severity of the situation. I nodded, though I had my doubts. In the meantime, I'll draft a business recovery plan, something concrete we can present to her. As we gathered the paperwork, Amanda hesitated. Lil, there's something else you should know, about Mom. What is it? I asked, bracing myself. After Dad died, she started gambling. Not a lot at first, just occasional trips to the casino with her friends, but it got worse over time. I think that's where some of the business money has been going. She says it's for supplies or marketing, but the receipts don't add up. I sat back down heavily. Are you sure? Amanda nodded miserably. I found ATM receipts from the casino, multiple withdrawals, sometimes thousands in a single weekend. I think it's her way of escaping of not dealing with her grief. But it's gotten out of control. This revelation changed things. If my mother had a gambling problem, simply infusing the business with cash wouldn't solve the underlying issue. Has she acknowledged the problem? I asked. No. When I tried to bring it up, she denied everything, said I was imagining things. I sighed deeply. This was more complicated than I had anticipated. Okay, we need to adjust the plan. Any financial arrangement would need safeguards. Separate business accounts that require multiple signatures for large withdrawals. She'll see that as another lack of trust, Amanda warned. It's not about trust, it's about good business practices, I insisted. Even if gambling wasn't a factor, those kinds of controls should be in place anyway. We parted with a tentative plan. Amanda would approach our mother with the financial reality, then suggest a meeting with me to discuss potential solutions. I would develop a business recovery strategy and consult with James about using our savings. When I told James about the situation that evening, including the revelation about my mother's gambling, he was understandably concerned. Lil, I support whatever you want to do, but investing in a business run by someone with an addiction is risky at best. I know, I acknowledged. That's why I'm insisting on partial ownership and financial controls. And honestly, it might be a moot point. Mom may refuse to even meet with me, let alone accept my conditions. And if she does agree, he asked, are you prepared to work with her after what she said to you, after how she's treated you? It was a fair question, and one I had been asking myself since meeting with Amanda. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to tell her to deal with the consequences of her actions. But another part remembers my dad, how proud he was of that bakery, how much joy it brought him. I'm not sure I can stand by and watch that legacy disappear, even if it means dealing with Mum. James pulled me into a gentle hug, careful of my still healing injuries. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Just promise me you'll protect yourself, not just physically, but emotionally too. I promise, I said, meaning it. The old Lillian might have rushed in desperate for her mother's approval, but I wasn't that person anymore. The accident and its aftermath had changed me. I spent the next few days developing a comprehensive business plan while waiting to hear from Amanda. When she finally called, her voice was tense but determined. She's agreed to meet with you, she said. Tomorrow evening at the bakery after closing. Just the three of us. I took a deep breath. Okay, I'll be there. Lil, Amanda added before hanging up, be prepared. She's not happy about this, but she's desperate. The bank called again today. I spent the rest of the day and night finalizing my proposal and steeling myself for the confrontation to come. James offered again to accompany me, but I declined. This was a family matter, and having him there would only antagonize my mother further. The next evening, I arrived at Sweet Memories just as Amanda was turning the close sign on the door. She let me in, giving me a quick, nervous hug. She's in the office, she whispered. Good luck. I made my way to the back through the kitchen that held so many memories of my father to the small office that had been his sanctuary. Now my mother sat behind his desk, her posture rigid, her face a mask of cold composure. It was the first time I had seen her since the hospital. Lillian, she said, her voice neutral, neither warm nor openly hostile. Mum, I replied, equally neutral as I took the seat across from her. Amanda slipped in behind me, closing the door and leaning against it as if preparing to prevent either of us from storming out. Amanda tells me you've looked at our financials. My mother began getting straight to business. And that you believe you can help. I believe the business can be saved, I corrected. But it will take significant changes, both financial and operational. We've already made cuts, she said defensively. Cutting isn't the answer anymore. The business doesn't need less investment, it needs more. But strategic investment coupled with a return to the quality and customer experience that Dad built his reputation on. I handed her the business plan I had prepared. She took it, but didn't open it. And you're offering what exactly? She asked. Capital investment, marketing expertise, and a fresh perspective on operations. I met her gaze steadily. In exchange for equal partnership, 1/3 ownership for each of us, equal decision-making authority on major business matters. Her eyes narrowed. This is still my business. Your father left it to me. And you're on the verge of losing it, I said bluntly. The bank can call in the loans any day now. This isn't about control, Mom. It's about survival. So you're taking advantage of our difficult situation to force your way back in, she accused. No, I said firmly. I'm offering a solution that protects Dad's legacy while respecting all of our contributions. I don't want to take over. I want to collaborate, but I won't invest my money without a voice in how it's used. Your money, she scoffed. What money? You're a nurse with student loans and a fiancé in construction. I have savings, I said, not taking the bait. And James and I have money set aside for our wedding, which we've postponed due to my recovery. Combined, it's enough to clear the immediate debt and fund the improvements outlined in that plan. She finally opened the folder, scanning the pages with a critical eye. I waited, knowing better than to rush her. After several tense minutes, she looked up. This would mean changing suppliers, going back to the more expensive ingredients. Quality is what set Dad's bakery apart, I pointed out. It's what customers remember and miss. We can't compete with grocery store prices, so we need to offer something worth paying more for. She turned more pages. And this remodeling, that's an unnecessary expense. It's an investment in customer experience. The Main Street location hasn't been updated in 15 years. It looks tired, and that affects perception of the product. And these new hires, another head baker, a marketing person, more costs we can't afford. More expertise we can't succeed without, I countered. The plan phases those in as revenue increases. It's not all up front. She closed the folder with a snap. And what about your job, your career, that you were so determined to pursue despite my objections? Are you planning to abandon that after all your righteous speeches about following your own path? I'll be returning to nursing part-time next month, I said. My role in the bakery would be strategic, not day-to-day operations. Weekend involvement primarily. She studied me for a long moment. Why are you doing this, Lillian? After what happened at the hospital, why would you want any involvement with the business or with me? It was the first acknowledgement, however indirect, of her cruel words. I chose my response carefully. I'm not doing it for you, I said honestly. I'm doing it for Dad, for his legacy, for Amanda, and yes, for myself too. Because despite everything, I still care about what happens to this bakery. My mother's face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. Before she could respond, Amanda stepped forward from her position by the door. Mom, before you answer, there's something else you should know. She moved to the filing cabinet in the corner and pulled out a worn folder from the bottom drawer. I found this last week when I was looking for the original loan documents. She placed the folder on the desk between us. My mother stared at it, her face suddenly pale. What is this? I asked. Open it, Amanda said softly. I reached for the folder and opened it to find a handwritten letter dated just a month before my father's death, along with what appeared to be draft legal documents. Dear Diane, the letter began in my father's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, something has happened to me before I could speak with you about my plans for the bakery's future. I read on, my heart pounding. The letter detailed my father's intention to eventually pass primary ownership of the bakery to me, with provisions for both my mother and Amanda. The accompanying documents were the beginnings of a succession plan that he had been working on with his attorney. He always said you had his head for business, my mother said quietly, not looking at either of us. His creativity with the recipes, but my practicality with the numbers. He said it was the perfect combination. I looked up from the letter stunned. You knew about this. She nodded slowly. I found it after the funeral. I was so angry. At him for dying. At you for being his choice instead of me. At the world for taking him when we still had so much life to live together. Her voice cracked slightly. I hid the documents, told myself he hadn't finalized anything so it didn't matter, that I knew better what the business needed. Amanda reached out and took our mother's hand. Mom, it's time to let go of that anger. It's destroying everything, including you. My mother pulled her hand away, but gently. I know, she whispered. I know it is. She looked at me directly. The gambling. Amanda told you. I nodded, surprised by her openness. It started as a distraction, a way to feel something besides the grief. Then it became a way to chase the losses, convinced I could fix everything myself if I just got one big win. She laughed bitterly. Your father would be so disappointed in what I've done to his business, to our family. Then let's fix it, I said, leaning forward. Together. Not just the business, but the family too. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But we can start. My mother was silent for a long moment, looking between me, Amanda, and the documents on the desk. Finally, she straightened her shoulders. Your plan, she said, tapping the folder I had given her. The financial controls you mention, the separate accounts requiring multiple signatures. That's because of my gambling, isn't it? Partly, I admitted. It's also just good business practice. She nodded slowly. It's reasonable and necessary. She took a deep breath. I'll agree to your terms with one condition of my own. What's that? I asked cautiously. I need help for the gambling. She said the words as if they physically pained her. I can't be trusted with the business finances right now. I know that even if I don't want to admit it. It was perhaps the most vulnerable I had ever seen my mother. Even after my father's death, she had maintained her facade of strength and control. We'll find you the right support, I promised, genuinely moved by her admission. And Lillian, she added, her voice still strained but determined, What I said at the hospital, I was wrong. Inexcusably wrong. I was terrified of losing you, and in my fear, I lashed out in the worst possible way. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am truly sorry. It wasn't a perfect apology. It contained elements of self-justification, of explanation, rather than pure contrition. But from my mother, it was extraordinary. A crack in the wall she had built around herself since my father's death. Thank you for saying that, I said carefully. I can't pretend those words didn't hurt me deeply, and rebuilding trust will take time, but I'm willing to try if you are. Amanda, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly burst into tears. I can't believe this is happening, she sobbed. I was so sure one of you would storm out. Despite everything, I found myself laughing, and after a moment, even my mother's lips curved in a slight smile. Well, she said, picking up my business plan again. Let's go through this properly then. I have some questions about your marketing budget allocations. And just like that, we began the slow, painstaking process of rebuilding not just a business, but a family. There was still a long road ahead, filled with difficult conversations and moments where old patterns threatened to re-emerge. But for the first time since my father's death, perhaps even before I felt hope that we might find our way to something better. As I walked out of the bakery that night, I paused in the kitchen, running my hand over the worn countertop where my father had taught me to knead dough. I could almost feel his presence, his approval. I'm keeping your legacy alive, Dad, I whispered. Just not in the way any of us expected. The months that followed were among the most challenging and rewarding of my life. Juggling my return to nursing with the bakery revitalization and my ongoing physical recovery tested my limits daily. But slowly, steadily, progress emerged on all fronts. My mother, true to her word, began attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. It wasn't an easy process. There were relapses, denials, moments of backsliding into old patterns. But with Amanda's daily support and my firm insistence on maintaining the financial controls we had established, she gradually gained better control over her addiction. The business transformation was equally challenging. We secured a short-term extension from the bank based on our new business plan and initial capital infusion. James had been fully supportive of using our wedding funds, insisting we could always have a simple ceremony when the time came. I just want to marry you, he said. I don't care if it's in a cathedral or the courthouse. We began with the Main Street location, our flagship store. Instead of a complete remodel, which we couldn't yet afford, we made strategic changes. Fresh paint in warmer colours, new display cases that showed off the products better, a small seating area with comfortable chairs and free Wi-Fi encouraging customers to linger. More importantly, we returned to my father's original recipes and quality standards. This meant higher costs initially, but as word spread that Sweet Memories was returning to its roots, customer traffic increased. We hired a talented young baker who had trained at a prestigious culinary school, someone who respected tradition but brought fresh ideas as well. Marketing was my domain. I created social media accounts for the bakery, posting daily photos of our creations. I reached out to local businesses about corporate orders, for meetings and events. I even organised a community baking class on weekends, sharing simple versions of my father's recipes while promoting the bakery. The physical space of the bakery changed too. We cleared out my mother's cluttered office and created a proper workspace for all three of us. And in the front of the Main Street location, we established a small memorial corner with photos of my father at work along with his original hand-written recipes framed on the wall. Thomas Carter's legacy, the sign read. Founder of Sweet Memories Bakery, Baker Father Dreamer. The first time my mother saw it completed, she stood silently before it for several minutes. He would have hated all this fuss, she finally said, but I could hear the emotion in her voice. Maybe. I agreed. But the customers love it. They come in and tell stories about him, about special cakes he made for their weddings or birthdays. He remembered every customer's preferences, she said softly, even after the business grew. He would keep notes about their children's names, their anniversaries. It drove the other bakers crazy sometimes. These small moments of shared remembrance became our bridge to a new relationship. Not the close mother-daughter bond some of my friends had, but something workable, something with boundaries and respect. My relationship with Amanda deepened considerably during this time. Without my mother as a wedge between us, we discovered how much we enjoyed each other's company. She had a wry sense of humour I had never fully appreciated before, and a talent for customer relations that proved invaluable to the business. You know, she told me one night as we were closing up, I always envied you growing up. You were so confident, so willing to stand up to Mom. I thought you were fearless. Far from it, I admitted. I was terrified most of the time. I just got better at hiding it. Well, you inspired me anyway, she said, bumping my shoulder gently with hers. Still do. Aunt Catherine became a regular presence in our lives as well. Once my mother realized that Amanda and I were maintaining our relationship with her, she grudgingly agreed to civil interactions when necessary. These gradually evolved into cautious conversations, then eventually to a tentative reconciliation of their own. 17 years is a long time to hold a grudge, Catherine told my mother during one particularly honest conversation. Don't you think it's time we both let it go? You were always better at forgiveness than I was, my mother admitted. But yes, I think it's time. James was my rock throughout this transformation. He spent weekends helping with repairs at the bakery evenings, listening to my frustrations and celebrations, and somehow still found energy to support my physical recovery as well. 6 months after the accident, I was finally free of the cane, though certain movements still caused pain in my pelvis and ribs. We set a new wedding date for the following spring, planning a simple ceremony in the garden of Aunt Catherine's home. To my surprise, my mother offered to bake our wedding cake herself. Unless you'd prefer someone else, she added quickly, showing a new awareness of boundaries that would have been unthinkable before. I'd be honoured, I told her, and meant it. The business turned a corner financially around the 6-month mark as well. We were no longer operating at a loss, and while profits were modest, the trajectory was positive. The bank agreed to restructure our loans based on our progress, giving us breathing room to continue the improvements. We organised a grand reopening event for the Main Street location to celebrate the revitalisation. Local press covered it, and customers lined up down the block for special promotions and to see the changes. My mother, Amanda, and I stood together for photos presenting a united front that wasn't entirely forced. What I didn't expect was my mother's behaviour during the event. She was charming with customers, gracious with the press, and publicly credited me with bringing fresh ideas that saved our family business. She even acknowledged her absence from day-to-day operations in recent months, attributing it vaguely to health concerns rather than revealing her gambling addiction. As the successful day wound down and the last customers left, my mother asked me to join her in my father's old office. My stomach tightened with instinctive apprehension, but I reminded myself how far we had come and followed her in. She closed the door and sat behind the desk, motioning for me to take the chair opposite. For a moment, it felt like our confrontation 6 months earlier, but her posture was different. Less defensive, more uncertain. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, and talking in my support group and with my therapist. This was news to me. I knew about the Gamblers Anonymous meetings, but not about individual therapy. That's good, I said encouragingly. One of the things I've been working on is making amends. Not just apologies, but genuine attempts to repair the damage I've caused. She took a deep breath. What I said to you in the hospital was unforgivable. I know that. I was lashing out from my own pain and fear, but that's no excuse. Mum, we've moved past that. I began, uncomfortable with her unusual vulnerability. No, please let me finish, she insisted. I need to say this properly. She gathered herself. I was wrong, Lillian, not just in what I said that day, but in how I've treated you for years. After your father died, I was so lost, so angry. I took it out on you because you reminded me so much of him. Not just your appearance, but your spirit, your determination to follow your own path. I sat in stunned silence as she continued. I convinced myself I was protecting you by trying to control you. But really, I was trying to protect myself from the pain of possibly losing you too. And in doing so, I nearly drove you away completely. Her eyes filled with tears, something I had rarely seen. I am so deeply sorry, Lillian. Not just for the words at the hospital, but for all of it. For not being the mother you deserved. I felt my own eyes welling up. This was the apology I had never expected to hear, the acknowledgement of patterns that went far beyond one cruel moment. I don't expect immediate forgiveness, she continued. I know trust has to be rebuilt over time through actions, not just words, but I want you to know that I am trying to change. For myself, for our family, and for the memory of your father, who would be so disappointed in how I've handled things. Dad would be proud of you for getting help, I said, finding my voice. For admitting you needed it. That takes courage. Not as much courage as it took for you to come back after what I said, she replied. To offer help when you had every right to walk away. I didn't do it for you, I reminded her gently. I know. You did it for your father, for Amanda, for the business. But the fact remains you could have let it all fall apart and washed your hands of us. You didn't. She paused. Your father was right about you. You do have his head for business. And more importantly, his heart. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of conflict and recent healing filling the space between us. I don't know if we'll ever have the relationship we might have had if things were different, my mother finally said. But I hope we can continue building something new, something based on mutual respect rather than control and rebellion. I'd like that, I said, surprised to find I meant it. She nodded, then opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small box. I have something for you. I've been waiting for the right moment. She passed it across the desk. I opened it to find my father's watch, the one he had worn every day of his adult life. He wanted you to have it, she said. It was in his will, but I kept it. It was selfish of me. It's rightfully yours. I lifted the watch carefully. The leather band was worn from years on my father's wrist. The face was slightly scratched, but still kept perfect time. I had distinct memories of watching him wind it each morning, of how he would hold it to his ear to listen to the ticking when he was thinking. Thank you, I whispered, slipping it onto my own wrist. It was too big, designed for my father's larger frame, but the weight of it felt right somehow. There's something else too, my mother said. I've been thinking about the wedding. I know you and James have scaled back your plans because of investing in the business. I'd like to help if you'll let me. I tensed slightly. Financial help from my mother had always come with strings attached. Not to control anything, she added quickly, noting my reaction. Whatever plans you two have made are your decision, but perhaps as our gift, Catherine and I could handle the reception, the food, the flowers, the venue if you need one. That's very generous, I said cautiously. But are you sure you and Catherine can work together on something like that without friction? To my surprise, she laughed, a genuine sound I had heard too rarely in recent years. We've been having weekly lunch dates for the past month. Baby steps. But yes, I think we can manage to plan a party without killing each other. Then we'd be grateful for the help, I said, realizing as I spoke that I was no longer afraid of accepting assistance from my mother. The power dynamic had shifted, creating space for genuine giving without control. We rejoined the others who were cleaning up after the reopening celebration. James took one look at my face and raised a questioning eyebrow. I nodded slightly, letting him know everything was okay. More than okay, actually. That evening, as James and I walked home, I told him about my conversation with my mother about the watch, about her offer to help with the wedding. Are you comfortable with that? He asked. Her being involved in the wedding planning. Surprisingly, yes, I said. It's different now. She's different. I'm different. The accident changed a lot of things, he observed. Not all for the worse, it seems. No, I agreed, thinking about the journey of the past 6 months. Sometimes it takes breaking something completely to rebuild it better than it was before. He squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, you know, for your strength through all of this, for your willingness to forgive without forgetting, for standing up for yourself while still offering compassion. I had a good example, I said, leaning against him as we walked. You never gave up on me even at my lowest points. Never will, he promised, kissing the top of my head. As we reached our apartment building, I paused to look up at the stars, my father's watch heavy on my wrist, the bakery's successful reopening behind us, my mother's genuine apology still fresh in my mind. You're dead to me, she had said in that hospital room. Words meant to wound, to sever, to end. Instead, they had become the catalyst for a new beginning. For her, for me, for our entire family. Sometimes the most devastating moments can lead to the most unexpected transformations. My near-death experience had brought new life to relationships I had thought beyond repair. It had forced confrontation of long-buried truths and patterns. It had created space for healing that might never have happened otherwise. I wasn't grateful for the accident itself, for the physical pain and limitations I still dealt with daily, but I was grateful for the clarity it had brought, for the courage it had forced me to find, for the choices it had compelled me to make. You're dead to me. 5 words that could have been an ending, but instead became a beginning. 5 words that broke me open and allowed something stronger to grow in the cracks. I looked at James, at the life we were building together, and felt a peace I had never known before. Ready to go in, he asked. Yes, I said, taking his hand. I'm ready. I truly was, not just for the evening ahead, but for whatever the future might bring. Because I had learned the most important lesson of all, that even in our most broken moments, we contain the seeds of our own healing. We just have to be brave enough to nurture them. Has someone in your life ever said something to you that initially broke your heart, but ultimately led to positive change. Leave a comment below sharing your story. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and healing, and share with someone who might need to hear that painful endings can sometimes lead to beautiful new beginnings. Thank you for listening, and remember, our greatest strength often emerges from our deepest wounds.